to invest into a syndication. A few other investment strategies or topics. I've got 3 different case studies that if we have time, we'll get through all of them. But the first one is actually showing you how to invest into a syndication, just like one of Lee's deals, with your retirement dollars.
Yeah, the the name of the game is, being able to utilize that self-directed IRA and the money that you have saved over, years and years in real estate, as opposed to having to, be invested in stocks and bonds and such. So, great. We'll all continue to try to monitor the waiting room as I kind of go along. But we'll go ahead and start the initial presentation. Hopefully we can add some value. And if anyone has questions along the way, please, just feel free to interrupt me, or you can save questions till the end. We are going to have a Q&A at the end of the presentation for both myself and for Corey. So yeah, today we are here to learn about doing bigger deals, doing bigger apartment deals, not relegating ourselves to small multifamily properties. So that's what we're here for. We're here to learn about creating financial freedom through investing in true assets, real assets that create cash flow, or what might commonly be referred to as dividends in the stock market or other industries. Why do we invest in real estate? Because it also creates appreciation. Appreciation reinvested into additional assets creates additional cash flow. What's the best type of asset to invest in to continue to scale your business is value add apartments, in my personal opinion. By the way, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an accountant. So none of this should be construed as any type of advice at all. I'm clicking the mute all, but if everyone wouldn't mind just like muting themselves, appreciate it. Yes, there we go. All right. So why value add apartments for the normal everyday investor? First of all, they're easy to understand. Everybody understands the basics of providing housing. So it should be a readily understood asset class. It's not something very, crazy or difficult to understand. Like for me, it's crypto. Like I don't understand it personally. Other people do. It's a leveraged asset. So your returns are based upon a levered asset. So then those should drastically be able to escalate. It's tax benefited. It is a wonderful inflation hedge, and you're able to force appreciation through decreasing expenses and increasing your income. So therefore increasing the net operating income and therefore the value. There's multiple ways to be able to do that on a multifamily property, unlike assets like retail. If you're investing in real estate retail, that's generally difficult to manipulate expenses or income as easily or frequently as you could through multifamily assets. And in my personal opinion, once again, I'm not a financial advisor or an accountant or a lawyer, but in my personal opinion, if you are not invested into real estate, you aren't properly diversified in your overall all-arching investment portfolio or savings. So we focus on larger apartment complexes, specifically 100 plus. Why? We could always go buy houses. I started out in houses like a lot of people did. Then I realized apartments. And why not just buy a bunch of houses? Why not go buy 100 houses as opposed to one apartment? Well, first of all, you're limited to your own capital, your own money. You're limited in your own skills. Geography is usually difficult because it's hard to own houses in Phoenix, Arizona, you know, or for me, because you want to be able to, you have to generally be there because you have to manage the manager and so on and so forth. So long story short, you're able to take advantage of a lot of additional things over and above you would be able to with a single family house. The value is controlled based upon its overall net operating income versus comparable sales of other houses in the neighborhood that you have no control over. So better debt, properties valued based on cap rate, not comps. And generally with 100+ apartment complex, you can see a much lower average expense ratio. So at the end of the day, why have a grape when you can have a slice of a watermelon? So, and by the way, anyone here in this room, anyone generally anywhere can invest in large 100+ multifamily properties through what's commonly referred to as a syndication. What is a syndication? We pool other people's money into a group, and then we use that to acquire the asset, the equity or the capex money that's used to acquire the asset. You get to partner with a seasoned team of investors who are solely focused on this investment. This is generally their full-time job. This is my full-time job. This is all I do anymore, as opposed to being like a weekend warrior or relying on someone who might be not a true professional in the industry. We also provide generally in a syndication, there's a common term as a preferred return. That is the return on your capital before the split occurs between the active partners, the general partners, and the passive partners, the limited partners. So a limited partner can usually achieve wonderful returns on their capital, investing less time with less risk, and generally have a great cash flow and great returns on their money. We target a 9% cash on cash return and a minimum of a 17% internal rate of return on our investors' capital. There's two different types of syndications. There's a 506B syndication, which is not allowed to be marketed. In order for you to invest in a 506B syndication, we need to have a relationship ahead of time. So if any of you are actually interested in being a limited partner on a syndication, let's be friends first. You can invest in 506C syndications, but you do have to be an accredited investor in order to be able to invest in those. They are publicly marketed, but you have to meet the qualifications of being an accredited investor. If you want to know what that is, Google it. We've done both B's and C's before in the past, and we will continue to do those. So I'd love to open the opportunity for any of you to join in and connect with me ahead of time for opportunity to be able to invest in our future deals, of which we have many. Now, past performance is generally a qualifier for whether or not an investor would want to invest their money in with a syndicator. I have been the lead person for these particular 5 deals, a 38 unit, a 70 unit, a 76 unit, a 272 unit, 3 property portfolio, and a 138 unit. So have experience before in the past of success. We're not here to necessarily just learn from me. If you were interested in scheduling a call, I threw it in the chat. We could schedule a call with me in order to have that first intro call and become a member of the Green Forest Capital Passive Investing crew. So jump on and schedule a call. Let's get to know each other. And for you, those of you who would be interested in being an active partner in one of my future deals, reach out and we can schedule a call to talk about that as well. All right, so we're not here to listen for me. I'm glad I was able to get through that pretty quickly. So we're here to learn from Corey. So you keep clicking, boom. All right, now it is Corey's going to get the spotlight, and we're going to learn from Corey about our main subject line. So Corey, take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Lee. Appreciate your intro and kind of covering the basis of syndication investing for the audience tonight. I'm going to take a little bit of a turn and we're going to talk about real estate within a retirement account, which some people are not familiar with, don't even know that you can do it. I'm going to show you the tool being a self-directed IRA or 401k that will allow you to invest into these types of syndications with your tax sheltered money. So just to kick it off, my name's Corey. I work with Advanta IRA. We're a self-directed retirement account administrator. Lee, if you could flip the slide, please. I've been in the industry since 2016 with the same company. I've spent about 5 years as a client account manager processing investment transactions on a day-to-day basis. So I've actually processed thousands of real estate deals, whether they be into syndications or into single family homes, multifamily homes. I've seen pretty much anything under the gamut. So I have experience and can help people as they decide what strategies fit their needs and how to actually accomplish them in a very clear and concise manner. I've got all my contact information here. I did post it in the chat as well earlier, and I'll be happy to share it again towards the end of the call. Lee, next slide. So Advanta's been around as a company for about 20 years now. We've got just under 10,000 active clients and just over 2 billion in assets under management. All of the funds a client has with us that are not actively in an investment are insured up to FDIC limits. And the other thing that we do, aside from providing a lot of free education on self-directed investing, that we offer to pretty much stand ourselves above and beyond other competitors in our industry, is we offer each client a dedicated client account manager or a one-to-one person that they deal with in our team. So you don't have to reach out to a call center like your larger custodians, your T. Rowe Price, Edward Jones, Merrill Lynch, where you may be speaking to a different person each time you try to call your retirement account company to get questions answered or deal with the transaction. You get one person on our team, aside from pretty much who onboards you, who helps you from the sales process and onboarding process, that's your go-to person moving forward. And there's really no one else in the industry that offers that. Next slide, please. As Lee said, I'm also not a CPA, tax preparer, tax advisor, or financial advisor. So I'm going to speak to you about a lot of things today, and I'm not providing any tax, legal, or financial advice. I always implore you to do your own due diligence before you partake in any specific investment or strategy that you may hear about. Next slide. So again, today I'm covering what are self-directed plans, how to utilize them, how to get them funded so you know how easy it is to actually move money into a self-direct account and how it does not create a tax consequence. I'm going to go over some case studies of investment opportunities that you could take, and then we'll cover the Q&A as Lee mentioned as well. Next slide, please. So a self-directed IRA is a topic or a specific term that you may have heard about. A lot of people have not, and you may have heard about it from a context that's not actually truly a self-directed account. So those larger custodians I referenced may preach that they have a self-directed product, which is really, when you look into it, a specific limited offering of maybe 15 or 20 stocks, bonds, and mutual funds that they've pre-selected for you. And they call it self-directed because you're getting to choose from the options that they've done fiduciary guidance and due diligence on. But a truly self-directed retirement account is one that you can invest into any asset that you would like. So no one's overseeing your account besides you, telling you what you can and cannot put your money towards. And that includes real estate, being a mortgage lender with your retirement account, investing into syndications, precious metals, and a number of other asset classes that you can really hold in your retirement account. In a few slides, I'll go over what you cannot hold, which is much easier than to tell you what you can. Next slide, please. Only about 4% of retirement accounts in the US are self-directed, which it really just has to do with not a lot of people knowing that these accounts and these products even exist, because those larger custodians that I've referred to typically tend to want to sway you away from these types of options, saying that their fiduciary guidance or their advisory services are worth more than putting the power of your retirement dollars into your own hands. To put into perspective, that 4% of the retirement account industry, the total industry as of the end of last year was at about $38 to $39 trillion. That's trillion with a T. So all of that money's in IRAs and 401ks, and only about 4% of those are being self-directed. So people taking advantage of these strategies to use a tax shelter as you're making your syndication investments or any types of investments that I've been going over here as well. Next slide, please. So we do offer a number of different plan types. Your traditional IRA and Roth IRA are ones that people are most commonly familiar with and refer to. But we also have some plans for small business owners that have higher contribution limits than Roth and traditional IRAs. Those would be your SEP IRA, your simple IRA, and a solo 401k. And then we also allow people to self-direct health savings accounts if you're someone that has a high deductible health policy, and education savings accounts if you've got a child in your life that you want to start helping prepare for educational expenses, whether it's through grade school or even up into college and post-college graduate level studies. So those types of plans can be self-directed. You just have to have a custodian like Advanta that's willing to hold the alternative assets that you'd like to self-direct those plans into. Next slide, please. So the key reasons that people choose to self-direct is A, they finally hear about it and decide that, hey, this is a new source of capital that I can put towards this expertise I've already developed for myself as an investor. So if you're an investor and you're doing real estate deals, you're investing into syndications, and then you're here on this webinar and realize, oh, I can invest into a syndication with my tax sheltered money as opposed to my personal pocket. It's a great tool and a great resource for you to generate income that you're either deferring the taxes on till later in life, or if you're using a Roth account, completely tax-free money. The stock market fatigue is another leading factor for people, at least diversifying, maybe not completely switching, but starting to set aside some money into self-directed strategies. And then the tax benefit, again, as I just alluded to, when you're making investments with your retirement account, there's a deferring of the taxes on any traditional investments you make, and a complete tax-free capacity for any Roth capacity account investments you make. When you're doing real estate, and it may not necessarily be involved in syndication investing as a limited partner, but for smaller class real estate, if you're investing with a retirement account and selling that property, it is not subject to capital gains tax. So that's another benefit for those real estate investors. But obviously tonight, we're focusing more on syndication investments. So that's really going to be something that's handled on the GP side instead of the LP side. You really don't have to worry so much about capital gains in that type of situation. But nonetheless, it is a factor, so I figured I'd at least mention it as well. Next slide, please. It is important to invest with your network. Again, self-direction is a more risky strategy in context that you don't have a fiduciary or financial guidance overseeing what you do and do not invest into. So we always implore you to build your network, come to these meetings like Lee runs, join your local RIA group, or find your local meeting in your area that's got other like-minded investors, and start getting to know them. That triad of know, like, trust is very important when you're doing your investments. So make sure you're comfortable with who you're investing into and do all that due diligence so that you don't have any, oh, what if feelings after you've already placed your money into the deal. Next slide, please. So getting the account funded. This is a very simple process. It's done one of two different ways. It is usually not a taxable event. The only capacity it would be taxable is if you're making the choice as you're converting to a self-direct strategy to also go through a Roth conversion. So aside from that, putting that completely aside, there is no taxable liability when you move your funds from wherever they're currently at into a self-directed account. The two ways that these funds typically move are by custodian to custodian transfer, meaning you're moving funds from one type of account to the same exact type of account with a custodian that handles self-directed assets. That is a very simple process. You fill out one form by the receiving custodian. They countersign that and submit it to the existing or current custodian, and the funds are usually moved within about 1 week, roughly speaking. It depends where your funds are currently at. They may have specific protocols in place that drag on the timeline a little bit longer. But in general, we see about 1 week, about 5 to 7 business days, how long it takes for a transfer request to be executed. Now, the other way to move funds is a rollover, and that's done when you're moving funds from one type of account to a completely different type of account. Let's say, for example, you're someone that has a previous employer 401k, and you would like to take that money and start self-directing it into syndications. Well, you first need to initiate a distribution from that previous employer 401k, and you'll roll that into the account with the self-directed custodian. And there is taxable reporting done here. So the distribution, just for context and purpose, is reported on Form 1099-R for your tax filing. But the rollover into the qualified plan is also reported specifically on Form 5498, so that as long as the dollar amount on Form 1099-R and the dollar amount on Form 5498 match, there is no taxable liability. It's a complete wash from that perspective. Now, if you take that distribution and maybe only roll over 80% of it, then you are going to have a taxable liability for the 20% that you keep and hold for personal use. Another thing I want to mention that I always try to cover on this slide is if you're someone that does have that previous employer plan, whether you've left a job with the school system and that may be a 403B, or you've left working with the military, which would be a TSP plan. Those plans typically, not always, but typically, when you leave the employment, they keep the money there until you actually request it to go out, but it's pulled from their shared investment pool. So in most scenarios, once you leave employment, even if you're leaving your account with that employer until you do a rollover, you're no longer actually earning any interest or benefiting from your money being there. While they are benefiting from having your dollars to put towards their investments, you're not part of the share of profits anymore once you terminate employment. That's just something to keep in mind if you are someone that may have one of those plans that you've had sitting on the side. For example, my wife left a job with the school system, and it was about 3 years that she had left the school system, and I brought it up out of the blue, and she hadn't been utilizing that plan or hadn't moved it anywhere. That kind of preceded our marriage. So I helped her get it all rolled over to another plan that's actually earning for us. Next slide, please. So as I teased a little bit earlier, I'm going to cover here what you cannot invest into or how you cannot invest with a self-directed account. And these rules are very simple. Again, my team at Advanta and myself specifically are experts in these rules. I'm here to share them with you, but if you have any questions, that's what we're here to help you with. So the only things that the IRS will not allow you to invest into are life insurance policies in an IRA account. We've recently come to understand that you're actually allowed to invest into life insurance policies with 401k plans. It's kind of a cutting of the market niche opportunity that's coming up right now. But life insurance policies primarily you cannot invest into, and anything that the IRS would deem to be a subjectively valued asset, anything that's hard to value, like antiques, fine wine, artwork. I always use the example, if you're a car nut, and you think a 63 convertible Corvette is something that's going to appreciate in value from the time you buy it, well, your neighbor down the street might not care about cars and wouldn't give 2 cents for it because it's just an old rust bucket to him. So that's a type of thing that you have to put into perspective when you're thinking about what you can and cannot invest into. You can invest into some coins and foreign currency, non-circulating foreign currency. Those are other specific niches that, again, we're happy to speak about and help you with, but those are just what you can and cannot invest into. And the only other way the IRS restricts your retirement investing is by labeling certain people disqualified persons from you as a retirement account holder. The disqualified persons are just your lineal tree. So your parents, your children, your grandparents, your grandchildren, those are all disqualified persons, including yourself and your spouse. Now, you can partner with disqualified persons in a deal. You just can't be on the other side of the transaction from them. So for example's sake, you can't buy your single family residence, your personal home from yourself in your retirement account, or you can't buy a home or a complex, whatever it may be, in the town you're sending your kid to school in, so that they can live there rent-free and have a few friends that collect rent off of. That in itself would not be allowed. You could still buy that property in the town your son's going to school in and let all his friends rent it from you if you want to generate income that way. But more so, let's just jump into a syndication deal, really. The other thing listed here is UBIT and UDFI. Those are very seldomly utilized or seldomly needed taxes that may apply in investment scenarios. UBIT is unrelated business income tax. That comes into play when your retirement accounts income is not necessarily completely passively driven like they are supposed to be. So it does not disallow investments, but it does create this window where you may have to apply and pay UBIT tax. For example, if you were going to invest into a laundromat or a car wash, if you're in any of those asset classes, there may be a capacity where UBIT may apply. That's something you would speak with your CPA or tax preparer about. The other thing here is unrelated debt financed income. And as I referenced earlier, as syndication limited partner investors not going to have to deal with UDFI at all. But just for context of what we do, it's a tax that's levied on the leveraged portion of a property held in your retirement account. And you may be thinking, can I leverage assets in my retirement account? The answer is yes. You can be a mortgage borrower in your retirement account. It does have to be non-recourse lending. And then again, you're subject to UDFI for the portion of that project that you're leveraging. But again, if you're interested in either of those topics, we can go into to that on a completely separate time and call. Next slide, please. So the asset classes for real estate are, again, single family homes, whether it's short-term, long-term, fix and flip, condos, mobile home units, or a full mobile home park, tax deed and lien investing. If you're just trying to get a retirement account started, that's a great tactic and tool where you can spend a few hundred, maybe a few $1,000s on a tax deed or lien auction. And actually, if it all pans out in your favor, you could end up owning the right to that property and the actual deed of title of a physical property in your retirement account. And then syndications, whether it's a commercial property or a multifamily property unit, as a limited partner investment into a syndication. Next slide, please. And now we are jumping into my first case study. This one is going to show you guys how to invest into a syndication deal with a self-directed retirement account. It's a real simple process, and we'll get to it right on this next slide. So I've got a scenario here with a gentleman named Abel, who is an account holder. He's got an IRA with another custodian that does not allow self-direction. And he meets John, who is a syndicator and has a private offering. They discuss it. They go over the full prospectus, and Abel decides he does want to put $50,000 into the syndication. So what he needs to do is contact Advanta, set up an account. We usually get the account set up within 1 or 2 business days of getting the application. And then we get the funds, as I said earlier, from Vanguard within about a week. And after the IRS's 7-day right of rescission period, which is the first 7 days after an account's been open, we're able to get Abel funded into John's deal, ideally on that 7th day or as soon thereafter, that we get Abel's approval of the documents and funds from his previous custodian. Next slide, please. So the process outlined a little bit further is that Abel is going to coordinate with his account manager at Advanta the approval of all of the subscription documents. So basically, he's going to make sure with his account manager that everything's listed in the name of that retirement account. For example, Advanta IRA for the benefit of Abel and then his account number. And that's tied through his tax ID number from the retirement account, which is Advanta's trust tax ID number, not Abel's personal social security number, just to avoid any taxable liability. Once those are in good order throughout the entire subscription document, Abel will mark it as read and approved, and then send it over to his account manager, who will actually have it executed on behalf of the retirement account by an authorized signatory. And then we'll actually also wire out the funds once Abel's authorized us to do that. Now, in this scenario, I'm just using round numbers just for an example of what is possible. John's syndication pays out 8% preferred distributions to all subscribers. So that's $4,000 per year. In year 5, the property is refinanced and a lump sum payout of $65,000 is sent to Abel's retirement account. So in total, Abel's retirement account generated $20,000 in those annual preferred distributions and $15,000 at the end. That's $35,000 of either completely tax-free if it's a Roth investment or tax-deferred income that he can roll into his next syndication deal or whatever other investments he may want to jump into after that. Next slide, please. So this case study here is just owning an actual piece of real estate, so 123 Main Street, as opposed to syndication. If you're not an accredited investor and not able to invest into those 506Bs, this may be a way for you to get real estate in your retirement account to get that process started and kind of build your way up into syndication investing. So let's look at this one. Next slide, please. So in this strategy, I've got John, who is the account holder. He's got about $150,000 in a previous employer 401k plan, and he decides he wants to do a rental property. He's looking for properties valued at about $100,000. Depending on what market that is, we'll see how good of a property is. But again, this is just a loose example with rounded numbers. So John opens up a self-directed account, finds a property he wants to invest into, submits an offer to purchase that property, again, works with his Advanta team to make sure it's in the name of his retirement account. He works with that account manager as well to mark all the closing documents as read and approved. We execute the closing documents, process the actual closing transaction by sending the funds out to the closing table, and then also retain the recorded deed once that comes back from the county in question. And we also facilitate all of the cash flow in and out for that piece of property. Next slide, please. So how does the cash flow work? Well, John actually picks who he rents the property to. We don't have any capacity to find him tenants or decide who he chooses to allow to be his tenant or not. It's completely his discretion. He comes up with the terms of the agreement and provides us basically the paperwork to facilitate execution. Once that's in order, we take in all the income directly from the tenant, unless he decides to pay to have a property manager in place. That is completely a client discretion period, but between the client themselves self-managing and Advanta as the administrator, typically a client is able to facilitate all this without having to pay, 8%, 10% for a property management company in these scenarios. Now, it's completely their discretion. If they have a portfolio they're building, they may choose to just for ease, but that's the case there. Next slide, please. Any maintenance or any work that needs to be done on the property cannot be done by the account holder or any of those disqualified persons I referenced earlier. It does not need to be a certified or a specific technician. It can be your local handyman that you've already got and like and trust. It can be a cousin or an uncle or another non-disqualified relative. As long as it's not yourself or any lineal descendants or ascendants, otherwise those disqualified persons doing any of the sweat equity on the property, you'll be fine from that perspective. And again, they need to be paid out from their retirement account. So when they're ready for payment, you'll have to submit that to your retirement custodian. The way we do it at Advanta is we have an online portal you go into 24 hours a day, submit a request, and we cut a check the next business day and mail it along, or a wire or ACH, depending on what you submit. Next slide, please. Expenses, again, they're paid, actually, that's what I just went over. They're paid directly by the retirement account unless you put a property manager in place. In that case, the property manager is usually going to retain a cushion of money and then send maybe less frequent distributions back to the retirement account. So that is how we would take in money when applicable or pay out money if applicable when a property manager is in place. And next slide, please. So in this strategy, John had rented the property out for $1,250 for 2 years. That generates about $30,000 of income. And then he sells the property that he bought at $100,000 2 years later for $150,000. So he generated the total of $80,000 of profit realized. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there's no capital gains to be paid on that because this was a retirement account investment. and John can now roll the full amount he has, so the 100 he invested plus the 80 he just created, into his next deal or deals. Next slide, please. And this final case study here is just a tool that a lot of people are not familiar with, but also the type of investors that you likely are, the entrepreneurial driven investors, really love this strategy. It's called checkbook control, or the checkbook IRA. This strategy really puts the power of your retirement dollars in your direct hands, allowing you to set up a bank account, move your retirement dollars into that bank account, and then you're the only one that has access to that. So you make your investments into your syndication deals or into other properties or into anything that I've outlined for that matter at your own discretion in the name of that retirement accounts LLC, which is a disregarded entity for tax purposes. Next slide, please. So with this strategy, you would set up a self-direct account. You would provide your custodian the operating agreement for that LLC that you go establish. You'll have to get a tax ID number as well, so you can open a bank account. But as long as we have the tax ID number and we have an operating agreement that clearly lists that you personally are the manager of your retirement accounts LLC, and your retirement account is the sole member of that LLC, then we process a transaction at your discretion, move whatever portion of your retirement account balance into that LLC, and you have free reign to do what you will with it. Now, again, you are making all of these decisions. So it's very important when you utilize this checkbook control strategy that you either double check with your custodian and administrator of what you plan to do, whether it's disallowed or allowed or not. If you're doing anything that you're not sure about, make sure you double check and get that strategy guidance. Because if you do happen to complete a prohibited transaction using the checkbook control strategy, there's not much that anyone can really do to help you. Obviously, if you're familiar with the IRS's stance on these types of things, they are not the most harsh. They do have a leniency towards letting you unwind something if you have legitimate negligence and didn't know any better. But it's really best to just have the quick conversation with your account administrator and make sure your strategies and your intentions and goals are all good and well. Again, it's very simple. That retirement account's listed as the member of the LLC. The manager is listed as you yourself and or any appointees, and that's all the setup is. From there, you use that LLC to invest into whatever asset classes you may choose. And the money can stay within the LLC until you really want to take a personal distribution for use of the money in a personal capacity, or you may want to move it back to a managed account. Let's just say you're diversifying your portfolio and you still have stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. If you generated enough and you want to pull some money back over there, that's when you would send some money back to Advancer, back to your administrator, to move into those plans elsewhere. But otherwise, you can keep that money rolling up in that LLC until you decide to dissolve and liquidate everything. And next slide, please. I think that I kind of just talked through both of those slides there. We can go on to the next one. Okay, perfect. So the membership must be 100% held by the LLC, by the IRA account to have that tax liability and that shelter. Well, you can have multi-member LLCs in a retirement account. It does lose some of the allure, if you will, in the tax shelter when you have more than one member in the LLC. And if you're just thinking, oh, is this legal? Is this not legal? There is case study that supports that you are allowed to have a checkbook control LLC. The two things I have listed here, Swanson versus Commissioner in 1996. That was a ruling where Mr. Swanson petitioned the commissioner, the commission, that he was allowed to serve as the manager of his IRA's LLC and kind of make those day-to-day decisions of the LLC. And he did win. So that was the first win in case study for this strategy. And then the T.L. Ellis memo in 2013 was a case that verified that you're actually not allowed to compensate yourself for serving as the manager of your IRA's LLC. So this is something you would be doing and not personally compensating yourself for. the compensation aspect is really from the IRS's standpoint seen as double dipping. So you're really setting this money aside to ideally generate passive income that you can take out later in life when you're ready for retirement age. It would be double dipping if you're also paying yourself a salary or any compensation off of the money that you're setting aside for your retirement account based on what you're doing to benefit your future self and your future earnings. So those are the two case studies that we quickly reference here. There is some others. If you're interested, I'd be happy to share those with you. Just reach out to me directly. And next slide, please. It's real easy to set up an account. I hope I've kind of covered how easy it is to get them funded, but setting up the account really only takes about 10 to 15 minutes. We have a 6 or 7 page account application. All of the fees and charges we would ever charge to a client are listed on page 4, our fee agreement of that 6 or 7 page application. And I can typically either help you through it over the phone or send you a very quick DocuSign to get that all done. Funding the account, as I said earlier, really only takes about a week to a week and a half and does not trigger any taxable events. And investing your account, you can typically get your first investment processed within about 7 to 10 days after opening your account. It's a real smooth process that we're here to help you with and make sure all the T's are dotted and I's are crossed in your retirement account's name, not yourself personally for any tax liability. Next slide, please. Just a quick tidbit about Advanta. We do put on a lot of educational content ourselves. We put out 2 educational webinars a week, typically every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 noon Eastern time. That whole content is also hosted on our video library on YouTube. If you're interested, we have great guest speakers all the time on different topics. I know earlier today, my colleague Alex covered the Secure Act 2.0, which President Biden just passed into law. And that does have a few implications in favor, actually, of retirement account investors and those trying to set money aside for retirement accounts. So if you're interested, my colleague Alex covered that earlier. He also, my colleague Alex specifically, hosts a podcast for us, the Alternative Investing Advantage podcast, which we post an episode once a week on. And we have a blog as well with industry standard news. If you're interested in the retirement account nerdiness, that's where you would go to check out our blog as well. Next slide, please. And our final event that I'd like to share with you, we host a networking event every other Friday. It's called Pitch, Promote, and Prosper. This Friday, the 13th, is actually the first one of 2023. And this is a session where anyone, doesn't have to be an account holder of ours, doesn't have to be a referral partner of ours, anyone that has interest in investing or looking for investors can sign into this call. You get your chance as a Zoom call like this to give an elevator pitch of who you are, what you're looking for, or what you have to offer. And then we facilitate pretty much exchanging contact information in the chat and a little bit of conversation at the end based on the topics that get brought up. And typically we keep it around real estate investment strategies. There's a lot of syndicators in that group and people looking for syndication deals. Next slide, please. And that's my contact information again. I hope that this has been valuable to everybody. If you have any questions, you want to reach out to me one-to-one, please feel free to do so. I'm happy to be an open resource for you all. I know I've met some of you already, and again, if I'm of value here, whether it's something you're interested in personally or not, just consider maybe speaking with your friends, your family, if you think they may be a good candidate for a self-directed investment strategy, or even interested in syndication investing, but again, maybe not an accredited investor themselves as a person, or maybe they have retirement dollars that you know they could put into a syndication and generate better returns than the stocks, bonds, and mutual funds that most people think they're limited to. And that wraps it up for me, Lee. You can go ahead and take back over and facilitate the end and the Q&A session.
Awesome. I really appreciate your time, Corey, for coming on and educating us all on self-directed IRAs and solo 401ks. It is a huge opportunity for all of us here, as well as everyone that you add value to utilize their savings to invest in any way, shape, or form they want to control. I am a contrarian. I like to have control of my money, and I like to invest my money into real estate. So, I'd love to be able to open up the floor to the audience to ask Corey any specific questions that might be burning in your heart or mind about self-directed IRA, solo 401ks, how you can set one up or help someone else. Does anybody have any questions that you want to ask Corey at this time?
Hey, I have a question, Lee. And there's actually two questions, but one was about the solo 401k, because some people had mentioned it. I haven't had time to research it. So can you, Corey, just talk briefly about why someone might think that a solo 401k was better than a self-directed IRA or an IRA in general?
Sure. Yeah, Jose, that was Jose, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely break that down a little bit. So if you're a small business owner or someone that's generating self-employment income and do not have any W-2 wage earners, the solo 401k is likely going to be your best option because A, it has a much higher contribution limit than IRAs, almost by tenfold. So you can contribute if you maximize your employee and your employer portion of your contribution. You can maximize out at about $58,000 to $63,000 for a solo 401k, whereas an IRA account right now for 2023, you're limited to $6,500 or $7,500 if you're over age 50. Part of that Secure Act 2.0 I referenced earlier, I think they're doing a little bit of extra benefit for those over age 50, but that won't kick in until 2024, if I'm not mistaken. But again, just in general, the solo K is going to have a much higher contribution limit for you. And then another strategy benefit to a solo 401k that's specific is that it's seen as an S corp from the IRS's perspective. So if you're considering leveraging property, as I briefly referenced earlier, you're not subject to that UDFI tax through a solo K, whereas you are through an IRA account. So those are just two typical standard responses to that effect. Jose, if you're interested, I've got an ebook that we send out to people interested in those small business plans or small business owner plans that kind of breaks down in more depth, comparing the SEP IRA, the simple IRA, and the solo 401k against each other, not necessarily against a traditional or Roth IRA, but those are great plan options for those small business owners out there looking to get a plan running for, in our case, self-directed purposes.
Okay, but you were saying primarily it's for people that do not have W-2s. Once I get rid of my W-2, then the solo 401k might be a better solution or a better investment vehicle, I guess.
Well, let me clarify, I guess, if that was, I don't know that I'm interpreting properly. The solo 401k really only suffices for people that have self-employment income.
Right.
In a solo, in our case, do not have W-2 wage earners. So if you have a W-2 that you're
Right.
working with, you may be able to do what's known as an in-service rollover of a portion of that to a self-directed plan. But if you're not eligible, and this is based on your current employer's plan agreement, if you're not eligible to do an in-service rollover, that money with your W-2 is going to be tied into whatever pool that they have. So
right, that part I got, and then yeah, that part I understand. I was just, is there some way to contribute to a solo 401k plan, even though I have W-2 earnings with my outside of my W-2 earnings? Because I have a W-2 and I have real estate investment earnings. Can I take those earnings and put them into a solo 401k?
yes, and thank you for clarifying that. That makes sense now. I clearly understand what you're getting at. And the answer is yes. So even though you have a 401k with a W-2, you can also separately have a solo 401k. The key factor there is that you need to have some sort of self-employment income. Even if you're funding the account with a rollover or a transfer from an existing plan, the IRS does not have a hard and fast rule on contributions to these solo K plans, but they do, within reason, expect you to make a plan contribution of that self-employment income within the first 2 to 3 years that you establish the account. So even if you open an account today, You do not have to make a contribution to it for the next 2 to 3 years, but you should have a precedent and expectation that you are going to defer some salary and make a contribution into that plan. And that contribution has to come from the self-employment earnings that you're setting up the solo K plan against. So yeah, all right, perfect.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
That's amazing. So just so I can kind of grasp a second, so that means that if I earn money on my own personal portfolio, I can defer those taxes by investing that income into a solo 401k, avoid paying taxes on my income from my real estate investments, and then turn around and invest that as an LP into somebody else's deal?
Lee, pretty much, yes. So I mean, definitely speak with a CPA or a tax preparer as it relates to what you're able to defer and what you're generating from that real estate income. But in theory, yes, you can take your earnings from your set aside real estate investment path, whether you're doing it as an individual or you've got an LLC set up, which most people usually do. Speak with your CPA or tax preparer. Come up with a strategy for how much of that you decide you're going to pay self-employment taxes on, because the key factor there is the money you're contributing into the solo K plan has to be money you've paid self-employment taxes against. So that is the key diversifying factor here, is whatever you're able to contribute is based on that self-employment tax. And then of course you can roll that money into any type of syndication or any type of deal within your self-directed 401k.
I love it. And I hate paying taxes. I think Jennifer had a question.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to jump off here though in a moment, but I have a whole list of them. So not in any particular order. One of them is you mentioned education accounts, and so I have 2 education accounts for my kids. I was saving for their college, and they lost 26 and 24% this year or this past year. And so are those, they're already established, can they be moved over? Or
Yes.
are those something that I have to establish with, oh, go ahead.
No,
can I
you
do
can definitely move them over. So you would just complete our application, open up the ESA accounts at Advanta, and part of that process, collect a transfer request from you. We'll get the money moved over from the previous plan, and then you could start self-directing those funds as you see fit.
Okay. And then what kind of, I guess you said the fees are listed on page 4 in the application. Do you have to like start filling out the application to actually get to where you see what the fees are, or can you see that before you start doing anything?
If you, Jennifer, if you email me, I can send you our application, and it's just a PDF and or a DocuSign at your discretion. You can look at it before you even start the application.
Okay. And then I had written down, and I think you answered it, like we have several rental properties and they're each under an LLC. You know, each property is, and we had paid them off, and so they're paid off, but now that money's sitting there. And so I was wondering if my 401k can buy my fourplex from me. So now I have that cash to invest in something else, and then it can manage. But it sounds like that was answered as a no because I own it.
Yeah, that would fall into disqualified persons rules. So your 401k cannot buy a property that you own. They also potentially look into step transactions or arm's length transactions. So just if you're already thinking, oh, well, let me sell it to my friend Jane Doe, and then Jane Doe's going to sell it to my 401k. If you were ever audited in the future, that would come up as a red flag, and that'd be a big issue. So, and really the rule of thumb is if you've ever owned a property in your personal name, that property is probably never going to find its way into a retirement account of yours.
Okay. Another thing you said in your case study was that so-and-so moved like 100,000 over to your company for the self-direction. Can you just do portions, or would you just move the whole account over and then pay out of it? Or
so
is it
depends on where the money is moving from. In general, yes, you can just do portions. In the instinct or in the specific context that you have a previous employer 401k, when you reach out to them to move over, they're typically going to kick you all the way out as opposed to letting you keep a portion. So that's the only scenario where you can't move a portion. But if you have an IRA somewhere else or a 401k somewhere else that you're allowed to do an in-service rollover of, so a current employer 401k, those are always allowed to be portional.
Okay, yeah, mine's been out. I have been self-employed since 2005, so they already kicked me out.
So your plan administrator, if you still have funds since you've left that employment in 2005, they're going to basically tell you to move all of it when you do reach out to them. But
I've already moved it years ago.
Oh, okay. So then
Yeah.
wherever it's currently sitting, you can move any portion of it to a self-direct strategy.
Okay, and then I had a couple of questions, and some of them I had before this, and they might be more specific to like, if like say Grant Cardone is like, oh, invest in our stuff. So okay, I get 100 grand and I invest it in there, and then the money's gotten paid back to, I'll say you, Corey, as my 401k administrator. The money's going back there. Is it just kind of going and sitting back in a pot waiting to be used again? And
No,
then
that's a great question. Sorry,
and
go ahead.
then if it is there like some amount that you have to come up to before you can invest again? Get up to a certain amount, or does it just depend on the investment that you want to go into?
And all right, Jennifer. So the money does come back. You'll get an email notification, and you could always check your online portal with us to see what your balance is. It'll sit in a basic trust bank account as undirected funds on Advanta side, and that is an account earning no interest. It's just sitting there waiting for you to invest it into your next deal. So that answers that portion of your question. We do not have a minimum or anything like that to either open an account. So I've seen people set up solo K plans, just getting their feet in the game and just starting with a $300 contribution. I've seen people move over millions of dollars. So we don't have an account minimum or a maximum. And with those undirected funds, it's completely your discretion. You may find, like I referenced earlier in the call, a tax deed and lien deal for $1,500, or you may be holding out until you have 50 to jump into the next syndication deal as an LP. So that is completely the self-direct portion, so that the client as the self figures all that out.
Okay. I think I have a couple others, but they're kind of just mixed in with the others. I think that was the most, and I have your contact information, so I can email you too.
Awesome. Sounds great. I'll be happy to answer whenever you want to reach out.
And I'll put my email in here if you want to send me that agreement or the.
Sure. Yeah, I'll save the chat. I just see it. I just saw it pop up. Perfect.
Hey, Corey,
All right.
I got one.
Hey,
Wes?
I have to go. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, Lee, for putting this on, and Corey for all the information. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jennifer. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Wes, was that you just?
Yeah. First off, thank you. That was awesome. Very insightful. So I have heard of people like opening brokerage accounts, or I guess like essentially taking a loan against your 401k or taking a loan against your brokerage account. How would you compare that strategy to this strategy? And like, what are your general thoughts on like the pros and cons versus those two?
Yeah, I actually just helped a guy earlier today who's a real estate investor with his personal money, and just getting towards the end of a flip project and needs some more capital. So he found out about that strategy you just described. It's known as a qualified participant loan, or a QPL, we commonly refer to it as. What that strategy is, for those of you that may not be familiar, you are allowed to borrow up to $50,000 or 50% of your account value in a 401k plan. Your administrator may not allow this. We do as a self-directed company, but the terms of the loan have to be set where you're making a minimum quarterly payment back into the plan. You set the interest rate within 1% plus or minus current market prime, and you have a balloon payoff or just a maturity date 5 years out from when you fund the loan. There's one other caveat too. If 50% of your account value is less than $10,000, so if you've got less than $20,000 in your account, you're allowed to borrow up to $10,000 regardless. So that in itself outlines the qualified participant loan strategy. I think, Wes, the second aspect of that is how does something like that compare to making a cash investment as a syndicator? Or can you clarify the second aspect of your question, please?
Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of curious on like what your thoughts, whether or not you would do that and roll it. I mean, or essentially like take it out of the self-directed IRA, like you said earlier.
Yeah, it
Like, what are the
depends on the
pros?
purpose. So in the scenario that I just gave, the gentleman cannot use it within his self-direct account because he wants to use it towards a property he owns personally. So that rules out keeping the money in the plan, but it does still allow him to utilize the self-directed account to borrow that money and get access to it without having to go to a bank and paying an interest rate that's not going directly back into his own pocket anyway. So it really depends on the context of why you want to pull that money out. I usually use the rule of thumb. If it's something you can do within the retirement account without taking that QPL out, then why are we even talking about this? Do it in the retirement account. But if it's not, like the scenario I just outlined, or maybe you've, racked up some debt you need to pay off or something like that, and this is just a better tool than going to another creditor for anything you're trying to do, then sure, it's a great strategy for that. Otherwise, I've had people reach out to me and say, oh, I want to take this money out of my 401k plan as a qualified participant loan, but then I'm going to go turn around and invest it into real estate. Well, why do that? Because you're going to end up having to pay taxes on that in some capacity when you've already got it in the tax shelter. You've already done the planning work. You're mitigating all of that by taking the money out to go invest it into real estate. Just leave it here and do it here, unless, again, the prohibited nature of what you're trying to invest into doesn't allow you to do that.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
But you could do both, right? You could basically, if I had $100,000 in an account with you, I could invest that as an LP inside of the self-directed IRA and then still borrow $50,000 against it to invest in something else. Is that a correct statement?
Correct. Yeah. Just to clarify, the IRA account does not allow the qualified participant loan. It's specific to the 401k plans. That is only allowed in 401ks.
And the cap is 50,000 on that, and you can utilize it as, this is a question, it's not a statement. Utilize it to invest in your own deal. I've run into a scenario before in the past where my father-in-law wanted to invest passively as a limited partner in one of my wife and my syndications, but he was barred from doing so because it's arm's length. So would he be able to utilize the loan, the qualified participant to borrow against his 401k to then use the borrowed money to invest in one of our deals?
In theory, I believe so. I don't know how that would tie into the prohibited transaction rules, and I'm just speaking out loud as it's going through my head. He definitely can't invest into your deal as his retirement account because the rules that I just outlined. But if he takes a qualified participant loan, there is no rule or regulation on what he does with that money while it's in his personal possession. So to that effect, yeah, he could do that. There was another aspect that there was something at the beginning of what you were mentioning, Lee, that I wanted to speak to as well, but it slipped my mind in giving the rest of the answer. So if it comes to me, I'll speak up.
Yeah. Or theoretically, Jose could do the same, where he could be an LP on my deal and then theoretically, use a QPL to then use that loaned money to invest in his own deal, theoretically, because I know Jose's an active investor as well.
So that was exactly the thought that I just had that I wanted to bring back up. So the rules relative to investing in your own deal, or the rules relative to disqualified persons and investing into a deal that, let's just say your father-in-law's example, it's kind of it's seen as a gray area for either investing into your own deals or investing into disqualified persons deals. The gray area really lies, and we always implore our clients to get their own legal guidance on this before proceeding. So again, with that disclaimer, the real threshold here from the IRS's perspective is the general partner team. If that's the disqualified person, let's say, Lee, it's your own retirement account we're considering here, or Jose's own retirement account. Do you, as a general partner, make day-to-day decisions and or have 50% or more control of the deal. That is one clarifying factor. So if the answer is yes to either of those, you should not be making that investment with your retirement dollars. It's prohibited in nature. And the other aspect is any compensation. So if you're being afforded a benefit, maybe a higher pref rate or any compensation that the next investor that's not you or not your retirement account is not being afforded, that in itself can also be a conflict of interest. So we've had people reach out before and say, hey, I'm on this team and I've got this pref offer and I want to do it with my retirement dollars. Well, can John Doe be a 506c investor and come get that same offer? No, I get it because I'm in this position. Well, then you really can't take advantage of that with your retirement dollars because it's not exactly double dipping, but the IRS does see it as kind of a gray area. So for what it's worth, consult your legal professionals before you do that type of thing. But it definitely, from my perspective, we see those as gray, and we know what we can say is a good idea or a good side of trending towards making that deal or not, but we're ultimately going to defer out to the proper legal counsel.
Makes sense to me.
Does anybody else have anything?
I got a quick question. Just a quick scenario.
Is this Nick?
So an individual has a 401k, roll it over to a custodian, someone like you, self-directed custodian, and invests in a syndication as an LP. So monetary compensation and distributions like cash flow and refi lump sum amounts go back unequivocally into that 401k account, correct?
Correct. 401k or IRA. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Or IRA. Is there any way to pierce that veil, like with cash flow, with distributions, with like a preferred return or a refi lump sum? Is there any way to pierce that veil and have cash be, deposited somewhere else? And would that create a taxable event? Is there any way to kind of pierce that veil of the retirement aspect so I can get my grubby little hands on some of that cash instead of putting it into a retirement account?
Well, Nick, unfortunately for you, the answer is no. Any piercing of that veil, if you will, would be seen as a disqualified. So you really do have to send the funds back to the custodian and then actually execute a taxable distribution request before you can take personal possession of any of those funds. Okay, so what's the light at the end of the tunnel for that? So in a normal 401k, you say, okay, well, we can't, take distributions until you're 59 and a half. What's the, for the self-directed ones where, let's say we're just keep investing up in syndications or what have you, homes or other real estate or, qualifying assets. Is it the same type of rules and regulations? Like, okay, we can't start to draw from that until you're 59 and a half or 65, or what's the end game for that? Yeah, pretty much that. I mean, these are individual retirement arrangements intended to prepare you for life after your career. So the end game is building that nest egg so that you can take, again, either taxable distributions, just distributions when you reach age 59 and a half, so that you don't have that 10% early withdrawal penalty at your ordinary earned income tax rate. Or if you have a Roth account and you're building these or even transitioning periodically from traditional to Roth, you're then able to take those distributions later in life completely tax-free. So, I mean, again, putting my personal investor hat on, if you will, and not speaking from a legal or a tax perspective, the younger people tend to be that I speak with, the more I implore them to very, very heavily consider converting their funds to Roth as best as they possibly can. Even if you're not so young, but you're considering those strategies. Before everyone signed on, I was kind of talking to Lee a little bit about the nature of my business. These past 2 weeks are the most busy weeks. It's basically my version of tax season, if you will, because a lot of investors want to switch to Roth and pay the taxes on their money now to keep investing it and let it grow for the next 10, 15, 20 years completely tax-free. And the end of the calendar year is a great time to do a Roth conversion because you can bounce the taxable liability of your conversion over the course of 2 tax filing years. So let's just see you're rounding out 2022 and you decide, okay, I know my income is at this threshold. I know how much more income I can really have before I bump myself up into the next tax bracket. Well, go right up to that line and convert as much of that to Roth as you can, and then start off the next year also making a Roth conversion if you choose to do so, based on what you expect your salary to be and whatnot, so that you're getting as much money over into a post-tax bucket as you can. And again, that kind of makes the light, if you will, at the end of that tunnel a little bit brighter when you think about it that way.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So to follow up with Nick's question, I know that, at least I'm pretty sure that contributions to a Roth 401k, direct contribution to Roth 401k are withdrawable at any time without penalty. That's a correct statement, right?
So there's a waterfall effect of making those withdrawals, and you are correct, Jose. It typically goes, and this is not something I have on the forefront of my mind, but I'm trying to recall as best I can. It goes your basis or your money that you put into the account, and then any earnings off of investments you've made, and then the next bucket of money, if you will. There is a 5-year vesting period for Roth accounts as well, and that does sustain for the Roth 401k as well. So respectively speaking, you can take that money out and it can come out without tax or penalty. But in theory, you are supposed to have the money you put into a Roth account, or at least have a Roth account opened in general for 5 years before you're pulling any money out of it. And you could have opened a Roth account 15 years ago and had it open for 5 years and not utilized it or not done anything with it. As long as you've had a Roth account in your life open for 5 years, you've cleared that 5-year vesting period. So I may have answered your question with kind of a little bit further context and separate, sidebar there.
You did, but my question is let's suppose I have, we'll say $50,000 of Roth 401k, and I convert that over to a self-directed IRA, and that $50K I had contributed. So regardless of how much I give to you, am I still able to do a withdrawal on that without penalty? Does that somehow, that still transfers over, that I can pull that $50K out without penalty, correct? Or is that not correct? Because you're just a custodian, you don't change the status of the money.
Correct. So we don't change the status of the money. More specifically, if it was vested money and you just had it in a Roth account, you should be able to move it and also take distribution of it without penalty in your scenario you just outlined.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry if I made that more convoluted with involving the 5-year rule and also the waterfall aspect. I thought that the waterfall was more so what you were asking about. My apologies.
No, it's okay. It's all good.
Awesome. So I think we might have time for maybe one more question while we have Corey. Or you can, feel free to ask me any questions you might have as well. Anybody else in the audience? Question for Corey or myself? No? All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending the webinar today. My name is Lee Fjord, and I am the founder of Green Forest Capital. We are a multifamily real estate syndication group. I partner with passive investors who are interested in investing passively into multifamily syndications, as well as I do partner with some active people as well. So if you're an active investor or a passive investor, I put my Calendly link here in the chat, as well as it's here on the screen. Please feel free to reach out, schedule a call with me. I know many of the faces and names here on the screen. Have met a lot of you. So most of you already have my info, but always reach out if I can ever help in any way. I've got a bunch of deals in the pipeline that I'm really excited about. in places like Florida, and I have one in Texas that just hit my desk, and I've got another one in Arkansas that I'm like inches away from. So lots of deal flow, and I look forward to adding additional opportunities like the ones you see here on the screen. So I'll conclude this evening's webinar, and I really appreciate everyone for attending the event, and I hope you have a great evening. Thank you so much, and I'll be doing this again next month, and hope you are able to attend.
Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Corey.
Thanks, Lee and Corey.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.